Never in history have we had greater access to information, but this easy access comes at a price. Most information we encounter is designed to manipulate us into taking actions that benefit its creators. And so, if we want to take control of our lives, we absolutely must be in control of our thinking. In this video, I'll draw on my 10+ years as a peer-reviewed expert in value theory and logic to share the one book you need to read to think more clearly and logically than 99% of people. And that book is The Logic of Scientific Discovery by Karl Popper. While it focuses mostly on the logic of the scientific method, I've extracted core lessons from it that apply to decision-making, communication, and personal growth more broadly. And the first lesson is, not only are we deceived by others, but we also deceive ourselves. Back when I first read this book in my undergrad, I was in a phase of my personal growth in which I equated my intelligence and knowledge to my self-worth. Granted, I did know a lot of stuff. Even at that time, I was constantly reading new books on multiple topics and even attending extra classes I wasn't even registered for simply because I was interested in them. But whenever I was in conversation with other students or professors and there was something they talked about that I didn't know, I kind of just pretended to know what they were talking about. And come on, haven't you ever done this? But why do we do it? It's simple. We just don't want to look stupid. But by avoiding looking stupid, we stay stupid. In his book, Popper criticized a popular view called logical positivism. This view claimed that concepts such as the mind, morality, and existence had no meaning unless they could be verified by our senses. Essentially, they dismissed anything non-scientific as meaningless. Popper pointed out that this view was a bit deceptive. As he stated, the positivist only replies with a shrug. Non-scientific concepts mean nothing to him since they do not belong to empirical science, which alone is meaningful. Essentially, what the positivist did was to cherry-pick a specific definition of a word, in this case, meaning, and then make conclusions from that definition as if it were the broadest possible definition of that word. And this is a fallacy in logic called a straw man argument. And the truth is, you're probably falling for some version of a straw man argument now. You see, let's say I'm someone who believes in the policies of political party A, and you're someone who believes in the policies of political party B. If we're having a debate in front of a huge audience about a specific policy, let's say whether or not to raise taxes for a specific project, you might argue that party B's position is that this tax will stimulate economic growth, whereas I argue that party A's position is that it will slow down economic growth. Now, just by being sneaky and clever with our language, either of us can prove that we have the best policy by introducing a straw man. And this is how we do it. As a member of Party A, I'm now going to define what you're calling the economy as the stock market. Now, in reality, we all should know that the economy is way more than just the stock market. It's prices, wages, GDP, and even more factors. But all it will take for me to seem like I've proved my argument that the tax will slow down the economy is to show that in at least one instance, taxes like this one have negatively affected the stock market in the past. And when I prove my point, the crowd will go wild, of course. Have you ever been fooled by this kind of reasoning? For sure, we might be fooled by someone else's straw man argument, whether that's from an ad we're shown, scrolling through social media posts, or in a conversation with a colleague. But more importantly, are you making certain assumptions you feel so sure of that you've ended up giving yourself a straw man argument? Because if we have, we might look smart, but in reality, we've effectively stopped ourselves from learning and growing. So then how do we avoid this kind of thinking, both being deceived by others and deceiving ourselves? Well, that takes us to the second lesson I learned from this book. Don't try to verify, instead try to falsify. You see, there actually are a ton of logical hacks we can use to think more clearly. Bayesian reasoning, avoidance of cognitive biases, Occam's razor, and so on. But wouldn't it be more convenient if we had just one powerful, logical rule that could guide all of our thinking? Yes, and thanks to Popper, such a rule does exist. And it essentially combines all these logical hacks into one principle. And that's a principle Popper calls falsification. Research has shown that social media has contributed greatly not only to political polarization and extremism, but also to social polarization more generally, in which people gravitate more and more to online and offline groups that share their opinions, and less toward online and offline groups that don't share their opinions. And the reason for this is simple. The moment we start scrolling on any social media app, whether that's Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, etc., we will instantly be served content which an advanced machine learning algorithm has predicted we'll like, with a high degree of accuracy, I might add. And I mean, this makes sense. The more time you spend on a given platform, the higher chance is you'll click on an ad and then they'll make money. This in itself isn't inherently a bad thing. I mean, I like watching content I like to watch. That's a tautology. Anyway, the issue arises when all we see, hear, and consume is content that we agree with, and we start falling into what's called an echo chamber. For the most extreme versions of this, we can look to North Korea or any dictatorship in the world where diversity of opinions isn't allowed. Essentially, the society just becomes one big cult. If all you hear all your life is people repeating the phrase, "Comrade Kim is our savior," then you will most likely start to not only believe that, but you will invest yourself emotionally into the belief, such that losing the belief will feel like a loss of your identity. Have you ever experienced something like this? Well, this is exactly what self-consistency theory in psychology and also decades of research in social psychology have demonstrated. So how can we not only avoid falling into an echo chamber, but also ensure we maintain an open mind, clarity of thought, and mental freedom and independence? That's where Popper's idea of falsification comes in. We've become so conditioned to simply repeat and reinforce our beliefs, but what would happen if we developed the reverse habit of continuously questioning our beliefs? Well, let's say I want to prove that the CEO of XYZ company is part of a wide-ranging conspiracy with other CEOs to purposely and intentionally harm a specific group of people. Well, on the logical positivist or verificationist view, all I might need to do is find an email that XYZ CEO sent to these other CEOs discussing this specific group of people, and I would simply need to make sure I interpret that email in a specific way. Do I need the context in which the email was written? No. Do I need to show that these other CEOs even responded to that email with some specific intention to conspire? No. All I need to do is find the fact I want and then verify my claim. In fact, if I want to be extra lazy with my reasoning, I'll even go to my opponents who claim there is no conspiracy and tell them, prove it. Prove there's no conspiracy. See, you can't even prove there isn't one. And hopefully you see the problem with reasoning this way. But hopefully you also see how we're also prone to reasoning this way. But what if we took the approach of falsification? What would that look like? Well, let's take the same claim that the CEO of XYZ company is in this same conspiracy. Instead of now trying to find the facts that support our claim, we would actively try to find facts that disprove the claim. In theory, this would force us to sort through all the email correspondences, look at all the company policies, audit the CEO's bank accounts. In essence, we would be forced to look at all the data instead of cherry picking it. And then we would come to our conclusion. Practically speaking though, it's important to note that this doesn't mean it's our burden of proof to disprove every crazy claim someone can come up with, such as that unicorns exist or that dogs are secretly super intelligent beings. Instead, falsification is more like an attitude, and it's a skeptical position that forces us to collect and consider all data, whereas with the verificationist position, we're more likely to engage in selection bias, simply considering the evidence we want to see and ignoring all the rest. And if we look closely, falsification is used everywhere. Science doesn't try to prove a hypothesis correct, it tries to prove it false. And if scientists continuously test the hypothesis and it doesn't turn out to be false, then it eventually becomes accepted as theory. Courts of law under democratic systems typically follow the principle innocent until proven guilty, and it is the prosecutor's burden to show that the defendant's innocence is false. And we can use falsification in our own everyday lives to make better judgments. Is someone using some testimonial or claim to try to sell you something? Try to falsify it. Is someone using some facts or data to convince you that you should switch to some new career? Try to falsify them. Are you trying to convince yourself yourself that you're not worthy of something or aren't capable of achieving your goals, try to falsify it. You see, if we actively try to falsify our own beliefs and assumptions, and our beliefs and assumptions survive the falsification process, then we can have a high degree of confidence that we're making the right decisions and are using our reasoning in the correct way. But still, we're not robots. We're humans. And the fact is that we do have emotions and intuitions and gut feelings. Importantly, Popper noted this. There is no such thing, he states, as a logical method of having new ideas. Every discovery contains an irrational element or a creative intuition. So what should we do with our gut feelings and intuitions? Well, that takes us to our third and final lesson: learn when to trust your gut. As a matter of our biology, gut feelings evolved to help us make fast decisions and have at least partially enabled us to survive as a species. After all, if you have to stop and analyze the probability that a hungry lion is somewhere around you, you will probably be eaten by the lion. So then how do we harness these emotions, intuitions, and gut feelings to our advantage? The key is what the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle called the doctrine of the mean. At the exact center between every extreme, he argued, is a virtue, and at each end of the extreme is a vice. Take courage, for example. If we're too courageous, this turns into rashness, just foolishly heading into situations fearlessly and without a plan. If we're not courageous enough, this turns into cowardice, simply waiting and procrastinating but never taking action. Whether or not this is psychologically accurate, it's a useful heuristic for understanding our gut feelings. Our brain does a lot of work behind the scenes to use data from our past experiences and knowledge to make predictions and decisions, all unconsciously. For example, when you go for a walk, you don't actively think about how to coordinate pressing your feet against the ground while bending your knees. But this seemingly simple process, which is in fact a very complex process, is anything but irrational. The most important idea we can learn from Popper then is when to use falsification and when to use our gut feelings. And as you navigate your own life, finding the balance between the two extremes will help you become a truly logical and independent thinker. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to make a massive impact in your own life and the lives of others, then be sure to watch this next video.